The Gospel, Luke 18, 1 through 8. Then Jesus told them a parable about their need to pray and always do not lose heart. He said, "In a certain city where there was a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. In that city there was a widow who kept coming to him and saying, 'Grant me justice against my opponent.' For a while he refused, but later he said to himself, 'Though I have no fear for God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice so that she may not wear me out in continually coming.' And the Lord said, 'Listen to what the unjust judge says. And will God not grant justice to his chosen ones who cry out to him all day and night? Will he delay long in helping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant them justice. And yet, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?'" This is the word of our Lord. You may be seated. Well, good morning. Good morning. It's good to be here with you all. I just wanted to acknowledge that it means a lot that you got out of bed and you drove to Rockville this morning and you're here to fellowship and learn. It's a treat to be able to speak to adults, as if you don't know, heard already, I'm used to a little younger looking of a crowd, but you all look amazing, and a little more fidgety of a crowd, so this will be nice, a little more quiet, and hopefully you guys are eager to learn as well. When Pastor asked me to speak this morning, I was nervous because I don't usually speak to groups of adults, but I was excited when preparing the message this week by the scripture that I got to teach on, which is Luke 18, 1 through 8. I hope you're encouraged by the words this morning. But before we dig into the text, Pastor wanted me to talk a little bit more about myself, so I wanted to say a few things. I'm a daughter, a sister, a friend, a wife, a mom, a photographer, a doula in training, youth worker, travel appreciator, and coffee lover. That one's really important. Those are just a few words that describe myself. My husband and I have been living locally for about 12 months now, and recently moved back to California from serving in Young Life in Germany. I feel like some of you guys, there's a decent amount that have been to Germany, right? Raise your hand if you've lived in Germany or been to Germany, just curious. That's pretty hefty, yeah. So you guys understand it was a little painful to come back in some ways because it's so beautiful there. But we came back and we're from the East Bay, actually, as my parents said over there. We're from Pleasanton, cute, charming city if you've never been there. But we're adjusting to our life in, I guess it's North Bay, is what we call it. And I want to tell you a little bit more about the story of how my husband and I got into ministry. So I had moved back from Germany the first time. I lived in Germany twice, in 2012 while serving with Young Life Military at Spangdahlem Air Force Base. And Eric had just finished his degree at Biola University. And we happened to move back to Pleasanton at the exact same time. And we found ourselves in an awkward stage of life. We both finished big goals, living overseas, serving, finishing a Bible degree, and now we were living with our parents. Thank you, parents. But not quite where we wanted to be. During this time, we both began serving in a young adults ministry, and that's where our paths finally crossed. We were waiting in line for bumper cars, and he finally got the nerve to ask for my number, and afterwards there was many texts and calls and dates, and we found ourselves married in 2014, and dreaming about what would be next and how we could use our lives to serve the Lord together this time. I'd been an intern at a different Presbyterian church in Danville, California, and Eric was a director for a Capernaum program, which is Special Needs Young Life, and we began to pray about what we could do together to serve, and we started thinking about going overseas again to work with Young Life Military. Of course, most couples our age were saving money, finding high-paying jobs. In our case, everyone was getting jobs in Silicon Valley, saving for future homes, and we were selling our things and putting the rest in storage and going overseas. In the fall of 2015, with nervous stomachs and excited smiles, we were on a plane to Germany. We spent 3 years there running a middle school and high school program for students of active duty soldiers or overseas contractors. And we learned a lot in that season. There was so many seasons of plenty and lots of valleys of dry and trying times, and a lot of adventures in between. We had a chance to visit about 20 countries and share our lives with military teens and telling them the hope of the gospel and the consistency of his love, which is consistent and never changing in a world for military teens that's always changing, in their case, about every 3 years. Our hearts were being pulled to, afterwards, after being there 3 years, we had our son Zion, and our hearts began to feel pulled to be closer to family, as you probably might understand that. But we didn't feel released from the ministry of military teens, so we began to pray, how can we work with military teens, but be closer to family? Well, some of you might know of a little place called Travis Air Force Base. I'm sure a few of you have connections with that place. So it worked out wonderful. We had the opportunity to move back to California, be only an hour away from family, and start the exact same ministry, but at Travis Air Force Base. And it hasn't always been easy. We've been at it for about a year now. It's hard starting anything from scratch and starting anything brand new. And California is expensive, as you know. But God has been faithful, and he's been with us along our journey the whole way. While at Travis, we met Pastor Joanne, and she generously shared with us about this position here at Rockville. So now I'm blessed to be here with you all, and my wonderful, crazy teens on Wednesday nights. They're eager to learn, searching for authenticity, truth, and looking for a true community in a world that's so connected on devices, but truly so disconnected right now. So that's what I hope and pray to provide for them each Wednesday, and it's a privilege to get to meet with them. Well, now that you know my whole story, let's dig into the text. I was going to read it one more time, but you can stay seated for this part. Then Jesus told his disciples a parable to show them that they should always pray and not give up. In a certain town there was a judge who neither feared God nor cared what people thought. And there was a widow in that town who kept coming to plead with him, "Grant me justice against my adversary." For some time he refused, but he finally said to himself, "Even though I don't fear God or care what people think, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will see she gets justice, so she eventually won't come back and attack me." And the Lord said, "Listen to what the unjust says. And will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones who cry out to him all day and night? Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will see that they get justice, and quickly. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on this earth?" Do you all have a story of someone in your life who you've prayed for, or you've prayed and you finally saw them get justice, or maybe a miracle? In the reading today, although short and seemingly simple, it's packed with meaning and symbolism for us to see. I want to point out a few things Christ is trying to communicate with us. Let's look at the widow, for example. Why did Christ choose a widow in this story? In that time, what was a widow seen as? Vulnerable, marginalized, alone, defenseless, lonely, and in this case, very desperate. Although the judge in the story had no heart for man or for God, he was getting annoyed and he said, "Fine, I'll give the lady what she wants." But how much more quickly would God respond to us? Maybe sometimes we think God prioritizes the prayers of those who are on stage, or those who write books, or maybe just those who have seminary degrees. But Christ shows no partialities, and in particular, he is close to those on stage or on the streets. Whether you're a desperate widow, or maybe you're a happily married woman with 5 children, your earnest prayers matter. I was thinking in modern context how I could think of a story that was similar to this, of someone who is lonely and defenseless, and something that applies to my ministry. So, of course, I thought of teenagers. Unless you have a teenager, or you feel called to love them, like I do, they can feel like a piece of work. Am I right? They're still children, but they're testing the waters. They're exploring their feelings. They're copying attitudes, and seeing who will still love them no matter what. I think teens receive their own prejudice from society, and maybe they've deserved it, but certainly they all deserve a fair shot. I had a student named Molly in Germany. I met her one day while visiting other students at the middle school in Germany, And I came and sat at a table with a bunch of other 7th grade girls. Well, she walked up to me with her tray of food, plopped her stuff down right across from me, and she was definitely wondering, why is there a 28-year-old woman sitting at a table with a bunch of 7th graders? Well, I began to share our story and about our ministry, and she seemed really interested, and it was Monday, and we had our program on Monday, so I said, come check it out after school. Well, she came, and she kept coming for 2 years until we moved. And I learned more about her story. She came from a teen mom of just 14 years old, and then she was adopted. Her adopted mother passed away of cancer, and as if it couldn't get worse, the dad who took over for her became violent and abusive. Molly had to be removed from this home and came to live in Germany with her stepbrother, who was only 28 himself, and had already had 2 kids. But actually, it seemed like a God-ordained perfect situation. I was thankful her life led to a safe, loving home in Germany, and God led her to us. Molly began to learn how the Lord loved her and wanted a relationship with her. He would be her perfect father that she never had. She came to camp with us that summer, and in a 15-minute time of reflection, which they do every year at camp, she said, as she says in her words, she decided to go all in with the Lord. During her first prayer, she remembered me. She remembered that I had had a miscarriage and I was praying for a baby. She remembered to pray for me and informed me her first prayer after going all in was that I would conceive. I couldn't believe that when she told me. And do you know what? 1 month later, I was pregnant with my sweet Zion. I made Morgan a frame with a photo of an ultrasound, and on the outside of it I wrote, God hears your prayers matter. Thank you for praying for my baby. I wanted to know her prayers were real, they mattered, and God was quick to answer. God was close to those in society you might see as a nuisance or powerless. Next, I would love to point out that Christ is giving us the permission to pray to him all day and all night until we get an answer. He didn't say pray only polite things or don't ask for too much or only ask for what you think I want you to say. No. He says to continue to pray with perseverance and with faith. There are so many examples in the Bible of people praying and yearning for God to answer. How about Hannah in 1 Samuel? Hannah was heartbroken for many years. She had no son, and she was bullied and tormented about it. She begs and pleads with the Lord to give her a son. She swears if the Lord will give her a son, she will offer him up to the Lord. After persistent and anguished prayers, she becomes pregnant. She gives birth to Samuel, a man who changed history, as we know. Talk about faithful and persistent prayer paying off. In Isaiah 62, 6-7, it says, you who call on the Lord, give yourselves no rest, and give him no rest until he establishes Jerusalem and makes her the praise of the earth. We are not to rest. We are not to give up. We are to pray without ceasing, as it says in Romans. But does that mean we're always talking at God? I think if that was true, we would be missing out on a lot. So much that we would be missing. We must pray without ceasing, and we must not rest in our perseverance, but we must also listen. How often are we just saying quick prayers before a meeting, before a doctor's appointment, before we need something quickly? Do we allow space to meditate on his word? To ruminate on his promises? Do we allow him to just speak in the silence? Prayer is communion. It's hard work. It's a discipline. It's relational. It's feisty, as one author writes. It's patient. It's expectant. It's full of faith. But what about when the answer doesn't turn out how we prayed? When our friend doesn't get better, when we lose our job? When life seems uncertain and rocky? And I get this question a lot from my teenagers. An author named Paul Miller, who wrote a book called A Praying Life, Connecting with God in a Distracting World, which we very much live in, he writes, sometimes we say, quote, God is silent. What's really going on here is that he hasn't told the story we wanted him to tell. He will be silent when we want him to fill the blanks of our story we are creating. But with his stories, the ones we live in, he is seldom silent. We are part of his larger story, and it takes faith and perseverance to trust his plan. Christ says how much more swiftly and lovingly will he respond to our persistent prayers, in contrast to the judge who cares less about man or God, who could care less about man or God. If the judge would grant a widow justice, how much more lovingly will Christ continue to meet us in our time of need? He also says at the end, when the Son of Man returns, will he find people of faith, continuing to trust in the Lord? Or will he just find those who prayed a few times and then gave up and moved on? Let the Lord know your heart today. In the book of Psalms it says, take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Remember, persistent prayer fuels our faith. Keep praying, keep believing, keep persevering. And one way, since I'm always teaching students, I always like to give them a practical lesson. So for the acronym for prayer, I'd like to, if you want to remember, P is for praise, or you could also use this time to pause. R is for repent. A is for ask, and he wants us to ask. And Y is to yield or surrender. Amen.